Okay. Maybe you all received an email with a link to my website, and I just updated it a little bit, so it's there's a lot more stuff now. Um, like normally, I spend the first 3 hours just motivating people, just showing them what Blender is capable of doing, because motivation is, in my perspective, is the most important part in learning anything. And but I'm afraid that today I might have to shorten this a little bit. But since all the links are online, I would ask you to have a look whenever you have some free time. I think it's really fun to go. Like if you haven't seen the Blender movies yet, that's quite fun. Like if you have kids, you can watch it. It's like mostly like for any age. So Blender, quite a long time ago, they in 2008, and they made the first open movie, which means that all the content for creating this movie is open source, like including the music and everything you need. And so this was all the way down here, Elephant Stream. This is I bought the, you could pre-order the DVD for helping to finance the movie. So somewhere, if you watch the movie, somewhere in the end, there's my name. And then the next one was Big Bug Bunny, and this was the first one that included fur and like hairy things. I think it was also the very first HD movie in Europe that you could use for free. And so all the like MediaMarkt and all the places that sell TVs, they would use Big Bugs Bunny for showcasing their new HD televisions, which, well, nowadays it's nothing special anymore, but at the time HD was still like a hype. And then came Sintel, which already had like a known director and stuff like Sintel. I still like it. And Tears of Steel, this came with like Blender 2.5. This was the first one where they implemented compositing, where they mix like real video footage with 3D models, which is interesting. Caminandes is from one of the Blender guys that I know for a long time. Like he's really funny. He's also doing like a weekly Blender update on the Blender community in Spanish and in English. So yeah. Caminandes, then Cosmos Laundromat is about like a depressed sheep on an island. Glass Half, I think I haven't seen this one yet. Yeah, so have a look. The latest one I think is Coffee Run, which is using some of the new 2D features for animation. Yeah, so yeah, this is the same list basically. And I also put the Blender demo reel. There's one, a more recent one, and the one from 2014. Yeah, and since recently, since 2018, there is a commercial Blender movie. It's called Next Gen. It was financed by Netflix, and it's the first 1.5 hour feature movie of Blender. I like it. I think it's mostly Chinese production, but it's really well done, and it competes like with Pixar and all the others without any, like, there's no difference. Okay. So one thing that I kind of hope that you all know is, I might quickly switch to my other notes. You should know what the difference between pixel and vector graphics is. So pixel graphics is like what your camera takes. So it's like lots of little squares. Whereas vector graphics is what programs like Illustrator use or Inkscape. And there's so the whole world of like 2D graphics is split in pixel graphics and vector graphics. It's like Photoshop and Illustrator or GIMP and Inkscape. And the 3D world is also split in two parts. One part is polygons, and they're mostly used for animation. So all the big movies, like from Maya, 3D Studio Max, they are all using polygons. And the other side, they're really called NURBS. Like people always look at me as if I'm crazy. They're the equivalent in 3D. So it's mathematical formula defining the model, and most of the programs used for mechanical design, like SolidWorks or 3D CATIA, Siemens NX, like most of the objects that lie around you, they were all designed in a NURBS modeler. Most of the NURBS modelers are quite expensive, apart from FreeCAD, which would be like the open source alternative to one of the commercial packages. And polygons would be like so Blender is a model. For these, and after a while, some of them, 3D Studio Max or Maya, like add-ons or plugins, never really NURBS thing, which is kind of a pity, but this is what we have FreeCAD and similar. Call Blender the Swiss Army knife of multi. Anything. It's crazy. This list gets longer and longer. Like there are links on most of the stuff. If you click on the text, you can see examples of what this all means. But I think it would take too long to go through all of this. And there's a vocabulary that you have to learn. Learning 3D modeling is like learning a new language, and it comes with its own vocabulary. So like subdivision surfaces, unwrapping, rigging, skinning, compositing. So yeah. And this is to confuse us. Like I know that this is a lot to swallow, and but with this, I'm trying at the same time to motivate you to be like curious about what all the things are that you can do with Blender. And I'm purposely overwhelming you a little bit because this is like MIT style of learning, like drinking from the fire hose. So yeah, that's just part of it. And I think I still have some videos open. I will just quickly show some of the ones that I already have loaded. So this is like fire and smoke in Blender. This is also a quite new feature that you have geometry that is not solid, but is just like an opaque matter. So you can, it's perfect for doing smoke and fire and explosions. And it's this, the mathematics are similar to fluid simulation. Yeah, like you see, this is another 47 minutes. So I will quickly stop this one, but the link is on my website. This is what would be called rigid body simulation.
Ferdy, can I ask something?
Yeah.
You just opened the page where you had titled "What Can Blender Do," and it's not on our tutorial, yeah? Page that you also shared us.
It should be on my homepage, which is
I didn't see it, so that's why I asked.
fcycle.de/tutorials Blender. You might have to refresh the page because I just updated it like 5 minutes ago.
Okay. I see. So yeah. Okay. Okay.
Okay. So this is what is called rigid body simulation. So you simulate stuff that is rigid, which doesn't deform or anything. The Stanford bunny is one of the most famous 3D models. And here they crash it and smash it, and lots of fun destroying stuff virtually. And it's not an accurate simulation. It's like all the factors are like pre-calculated, and so starting from a certain point in time, it just executes like a rigid body simulation. So it's not actually calculating how it would break. It's just like replaying a pre-made fracture. But it looks quite convincing. Okay. Then this is another little thing that I still have open. So Blender is also nice for putting 3D models in on the internet. So this is like a little 3D printer that I made together with Open Source Ecology. And you can see that it's just running on a website. There's no plugins or anything that you need. You just embed it there, and you have a 3D model that you can zoom and pan and rotate. And it has reflections, and it's getting much easier to have 3D models online. And then what is this one? Oh yeah, this one is an add-on for Blender that helps you again doing smoke and fire and things. It's called MantaFlow. And yeah, this comes from the Blender community, so to say. Oh, just a second. There's somebody that doesn't find the link, and so I have to find. Just a second. Yeah, where's my Telegram? Hope I still have it. Sorry, just a second. I have to find the. Oh no, I just sent it here. Okay. Yeah, smoke and fire. And what is this? This is even more smoke. And yeah, well, if you're interested in something in particular, either watch the video first or just ask me. I also put some links, for example, here. This is like the top Blender artists, some of which are already using Blender for 25 years. Like this guy, Andrew Price, he's the Blender guru. He has some really nice tutorials. Andy, like he's kind of the first one that I ever met in the Blender community. I will talk more about him in a second. And yeah, now the page is loading slow, but yeah, this might be interesting. Then yeah, so this is the link to Blender Guru. He has some really good tutorials. Most of them are for free. Daniel Beistedt, like he made the Pen Ultimate Blender logo. He's amazing. Like if you look at his work, it's yeah, breathtaking. And as you can see, I'm on artstation.com, and ArtStation is kind of the forum for like 3D artists. So if you, no matter which software you're using, if you're into 3D, this is the place where you would post your artwork and people discuss it. So people might criticize you or give you recommendations. Yeah, ArtStation is kind of the big one for any software. There's like a Blender category, but also categories for all other big animation softwares like Maya and 3D Studio Max and Cinema 4D. But yeah, if you look at his portfolio, it's crazy. Then Ian Hubert, like he was I think he was the director of one of the Blender movies. He's a really funny guy, and he's I don't know if you can say that, but he's cheating a lot. Like he has some very good tricks for making very awesome 3D models very quickly, and he's also very funny. So you should definitely check out Ian Hubert. Raf Grassetti, like he's not from the Blender community, but he's like into ZBrush, like a modeling application where you model like with clay. Yeah, this is the link to his YouTube channel. So if you're interested in this, you should check it out. This is the Blender Cloud, which is still rather new, and but there's a lot of good content. There's you can find all the Blender movies in there as well, but also some very good tutorials and for example, this one here, that's he's like the big master of procedural modeling. I might explain later what procedural modeling is. And Sprite Fright, this is going to be the next open movie. And there's already lots of content online, so you can like watch previews and you could subscribe for supporting Blender. Yeah, so Blender Cloud is definitely worth a look. Then the Blender community, this is like a website that is kind of hosted by the Blender Foundation, but it's mainly people doing this for the fun of it. So this is where you can watch the weekly show from, I forgot his name, from our friend from Argentina. And yeah, and so there's a whole Blender community page with all kinds of interesting links. And this was also kind of the starter for right-click select. So as you might not know, but until like a few years ago, the default button for selecting something in Blender was the right mouse button. And everybody hated Blender for like being the other way around than everybody else. And so the community started this website that is called Right Click Select. And so they are collecting recommendations from the users where you say, hey, I want light objects in the shader editor. And so you can vote if you think this is a good idea. And the features or the recommendations with the most votes, they will probably get implemented a bit sooner than they would without the community input. Okay, so I will quickly tell my Blender story, so you know like who you're talking to, because I don't know all of you, so I will try to make it very short. When I was in school, I was an absolute fan of 3D Studio Max, which is very similar to Blender. It was maybe the first 3D modeling program released in 1996. I started in 1998, more or less at the same time that Maya was came to the market. Maya is like at the time was like the big, like the expensive. It was a lot more expensive than 3D Studio Max, and so this was also the program that like Toy Story was produced in. Pixar has their own software which is called Marionette, but yeah, this is around the time. So like Windows 98, and I was completely hooked on 3D Studio Max, and I almost failed my A levels in 1999 because I spent much more time learning 3D Studio Max than actually studying for my A levels. And later at university, we were actually the first course to use 3D software instead of AutoCAD. And so for one assignment, we had to design this station for assembling pieces. And so we modeled it in CATIA, and I did a animation in what was called VRML, which was the old format for 3D on the internet. And so you could put it on a website and you could see like the animated machine, and you could fly around it. And I was very proud. And this was a plugin for 3D Studio Max that allowed you to make these WRL animations. And so right after holding the presentation for our machine, somebody approached me and said, hey Ferdy, this is really cool. Like, how did you do this? And I said, yeah, I used 3D Studio Max. And he said, oh, that's a bummer, because I would love to do something like this, but I want to do it for my company, and they don't have 3D Studio Max. don't you know any software that is like for free that could do the same? And I was like, yeah, wait, like I found something, I think it was called Blender. And but I wasn't so sure. And so once I got back home, I looked it up again. I had to search a little bit, and which took me a while because obviously it wasn't called Blender but Blender. And but I found it, and so I had another look at it, and I was quite impressed, and I found this image, and so this is the image that got me started with Blender, and I just couldn't believe that something like this was done in a free software. It blew my mind. It was like somebody that builds like an Eiffel Tower from matches, or like it was for me. It was, I knew 3D Studio Max, and I knew that this is complicated software, and having this for free didn't go into my head. And so I started investigating a little bit about Blender. And so it turns out Blender was born in 1994 in a small company called NeoGeo in the Netherlands. And they were a small animation studio. And at the time, it was still like some animation studios, they just wrote their own software because the commercial software was so expensive. So they made their own. And so NeoGeo was running for a while, but yeah, actually the name Blender comes from a song from Yellow. I don't know if you remember this Swiss band. Yeah, if you look it up, they used the song for the show reel for Neo Geo, and so somehow the name stuck, and so this is why Blender is called Blender. It's a song from Yellow, and here you can see the first few C files. Blender was first programmed by Ton Rosendahl. Like he's the father of Blender and is still like the leading developer. So like all of this is thanks to Ton, and this was all programmed on a Silicon Graphics workstation, Indigo 2. This is this was like the best computer you could buy at the time. It was 40,000 Deutsche Mark at the time, so it was like really expensive. And but you could also easily spend like 80,000 on it. And so yeah, this was the machine that the first Blender was programmed on. And in 1998, Neo Geo switched name to not a number. So I think Neo Geo basically died, and Ton started his own company and released Blender as a freeware. Actually, it was freeware, and you could, if you paid a little bit of money, you would get some extra features. And so this was around the time that I had my first contact. In 2002, the Blender Foundation was established, and they started the Free Blender campaign. So, so they announced that if they managed to get like $100,000, they would sell the source code of Blender to the community. And I think it took only a week or something, and Blender was released to the public in open source. This was the big day in 2002. And yeah, at the time, Blender was very like, this is what Blender looked like. This is Blender 2.25. This is the Blender version I started with. It looked horrible and it was not exactly easy to use. But especially since there was no help file, there was no documentation on Blender. So everything you needed to know, you would find it in this forum, which was called Elysion. And many of the features of Blender, they didn't even have a menu entry. You just had to know the shortcut. So if you didn't know the shortcut, there was no way you could do certain things. And since there was no help file, you had to like go through the forum and find new features and write the shortcuts down, because if you lost it, the feature was gone. Yeah, so I was really addicted to this forum, and I spent many hours just reading all the posts, getting to know all the people in the forum. At the same time, I installed my first Linux. At the time, it was SUSE Linux 6. and it was using the KDE desktop environment. And funnily, the little dragon here was modeled by one of the users of the Blender forum. So this was the first commercial, or actually it was for free, SUSE Linux, came on 5 CDs. The internet was not fast enough yet for like downloading something like an operating system. So yeah, Blender 2.25 in 2004. And until Blender 2.32, I was able to do renderings like this one. So this was my first Blender render that I was kind of proud of. Already had like grass and water and reflections and a sky. So yeah, yeah, it's quite small, the picture, but it's the best resolution I can find. And so after university, I worked for BMW, and my first task was designing the cylinder heads for the V12 motor, and I really wanted to render them. But at BMW, there was no way I could render them because I was an engineer. I did paid for doing graphics, and I couldn't take the models home and render them with 3D Studio Max. But then I discovered, and I couldn't install software on the computers at BMW, but turns out that you can run Blender from a pen drive. And Blender, you don't need to install it. You can just stick it in any computer and it will run. And you can even like keep all your configurations and stuff. And so also at work, I had like a 10,000 euro workstation, whereas at home I had like a crappy Pentium 2. So to my delight, I discovered that I can just render with Blender at the BMW computers. And so this was rendered, this is the cylinder head I designed in Pro Engineer. And it was rendered with Jaffarray, which was like an external renderer. And yeah, this probably took like a few hours. Yeah, nowadays this is nothing special anymore, but at the time I was very pleased to see something in this quality. And after 3 years at BMW, I quit my job and decided to cycle around the world. And on my way, I ended up in Gijón, in the north of Spain, where I was invited to like this was my first like hacker maker event. So in 2009, and there was the Summer Lab, which was an event organized by mostly rather creative people. It took place in the Laboral, which is like the design museum of Gijón. Yeah, the page is not really loading. And so they told me, oh, so what do you do? And I said, oh, I don't know what I do. I'm a mechanical engineer. What can I do that is useful? But somehow they figured out that I know Blender, and they were like, oh yeah, great. So you teach Blender. So they paid the whole event for me teaching Blender to everybody, which was great. So and I discovered that hey, there's a demand for Blender classes. People are interested in learning Blender, but there wasn't a lot of resources for learning Blender. So I realized, like before, I was going from like eco-village to eco-village, and suddenly I found this whole hacker scene, and I realized that they're all interested in Blender. So I continued my trip on going from hackerspace to hackerspace and teaching Blender classes. So I went to La Coruña and to Vigo, and I was always welcome with open arms for teaching Blender. Mostly I was very cheap, because if like here, for example, this was at the Faculdade de Belas Artes in Lisbon. So I asked for like 25 euros, except if you were a member of the hackerspace, it was only 20 for like 2 days. I don't know, this was just 1 day. So yeah, I think I was always quite cheap, but if you had like 10 students, this was some money that I could need. And so yeah, so I started making a business out of Blender. And in 2011, Blender 2.5 came out. And Blender 2.5 was kind of, it looked a lot nicer, and it was fantastic. Like suddenly Blender could didn't have to be ashamed like next to other 3D modeling programs anymore. So yeah, starting from Blender 2.5, Blender lost its ugliness and started to become like a really nice program. And in 2012, I arrived in Lisbon, where I joined the local hackerspace. And this is the type of workshops I was holding there. As I said, it was usually like 2 days and 8 hours each, with like going for lunch together and stuff. It was very nice. And I got some really good feedback. Like this is, for example, from one of my, so this is the site from the hackerspace, and somebody posted a message saying like, hey, I just wanted to say that I really liked the workshop. I think some people might actually know João Alves. And so this is the video he made after my workshop. So he integrated Suzanne in a video that he recorded. And yeah, so I was super proud that my students do stuff that is this awesome. And yeah. Yeah, so now like 20 years later, yesterday I did a search for, oh yeah, 2019, Blender 2.8 came out. This was the next big step for Blender. At this point, Blender lost its game engine. Like before, Blender had an integrated game engine for making video games. And there were like, Yo Frankie was like the video game made with Blender, and it was popular, but not very popular, because you still had all the like the commercial game engines. So in 2019, with Blender 2.8, they decided to kick out the game engine, which is not a big deal because there's like, for example, Godot, and it's an open source game engine, and it perfectly harmonizes with Blender. So if you want to make video games, Blender is still like the tool to use. And in the meanwhile, I created 2,632 Blender files. This is what I have on my hard disk. So you can see I've been busy. I went through 66 Blender versions, and they're still all available. I can still use my very first Blender, and it still works on the Windows 10. And Blender has this fantastic file system working. Like most 3D software, they can't even files from the previous version. But Blender, even the newest version, can still open files from the very first Blender version. And here, this is something I thought about showing you. This is a project where Yeva was involved. We made a proposal for an art installation at Burning Man, and I used Blender for prototyping a huge tree stump. It's like a tradition in Lithuania. For the solstice, you drag a huge tree stump in the middle of the village, and you burn it. And since Burning Man is also like an event for the solstice, we decided to make a big tree stump and burn it, which unfortunately we didn't get the financing. But I wanted to use it for showing you that nowadays Blender can do like rendering in real time. So you don't need to like hit render and wait, but you can already have a result that looks quite pleasing just while you're working, and you can go and change the colors and model and everything in a very attractive way. Okay, there's so much to my Blender story. I hope this didn't take too long, but I think we're good in time. If you want to get Blender, you can go to blender.org. This is probably the place where you all got it from. Then there's another website. It's called GraphicAll, which is like a community-based platform for sharing Blender versions. And as you might know, that in software, you can sometimes have branches. So if somebody, for example, there's one new feature in Blender that is the animation nodes, and they implemented it as a side branch. And there's lots of branches here. Like there's one that has a different paint widget, or there's one for doing spectral analysis. And so if you want one of those like side branches that are not on the master branch of Blender, you could check it out on Graphical, and they're also like very recent. So like, for example, this one was published on Friday and this one yesterday at 10. So you can get a Blender like from today or from yesterday. Yeah, but this is only if you're really in a hurry, and you can also compile Blender yourself. There's like an explanation for like different operating systems of how to build Blender. This is more like for the freaks that are into programming. It's actually not very difficult. You need to download a lot of libraries. So the very first time it takes a bit more disk space than downloading Blender. But once you know how to build it, you can build it every day. You can have like a fresh Blender every day, and it will have new features and yeah. So for some, yeah, I know quite a few guys that they build Blender like once a week. And another thing that I want to point out is the Blender demo files, which is under blender.org download demo files, and this gives you test files that the developers use for testing if the newest version is still capable of everything that the old version was capable of. And so if you want to test Eevee or have a look at some beautiful models, I highly recommend you to download some of those and just have a look. They're mostly very nicely done, and they showcase the very latest features of Blender. This one is probably the oldest one. It's a model of a BMW. And the good thing about the Blender community is that you get stuff like this for free. If this was like a commercial software, you would probably have to pay a few €100 for a model of a BMW. But the Blender community is very generous, and they give away everything for free. Or here you can, the Barcelona pavilion, like it's also perfect for practicing. Like if you want to get into like architectural modeling or rendering cars or doing animation, and you can peek at the way that the professionals are doing this. Okay, perfect. Let's open Blender, or are there any questions at the moment? Just quickly look, I can't see all of you at the same time, but I can see that we're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 20, 25. Yeah, awesome. Okay. Yeah, very nice to have all of you here. Feel free to always interrupt me whenever you want. I think in the email I mentioned that I'm going to be using Blender 2.28 or something. I forgot. But basically, the stuff that we're doing is not so complicated, so you can use almost any Blender version that you want. I hope this one, oh yeah, so here's my Blender. Right now I'm using Blender 2.90. But if your version is slightly different, don't worry, it's mostly the same stuff. Yeah, so maybe, can you, I don't know if you can give me like a thumbs up if you have Blender running, or tell me if you don't have it running, so I can wait a little bit. But if everything is good, then you should be seeing like a gray cube with an empty background. Awesome. Okay, so let's get into the preferences right away. So you go to Edit, Preferences. And we start at Interface, and I will just quickly tell you like the few things that I normally change in my Blender, which depends a little bit on what type of computer you have. First tab, I wouldn't change anything. I want to see, oh yeah, one thing that some people get confused with, if you start Blender, which usually is very quick. No, it isn't. Damn. then you see this this splash screen. And some people they wait until it disappears. It will never disappear. If you click or move your mouse, then you're ready to go. Like as soon as you see the splash screen, you're ready to work. Like many softwares, they have this screen for telling you I'm just starting, but Blender is incredibly quick in starting. Unfortunately, also very quick in crashing, but at least it crashes quickly instead of like 3D Studio Max, where you still like sit in front of a white screen for 20 minutes and pray that it's gonna work. Oh yeah, I'm on Windows right now. My work computer is from the university, so I have a Windows computer, which is kind of a shame because I'm more of a Linux person. But yeah, but this is what I have right now. Okay, so don't wait for the splash screen. Just click and it will disappear. And let's go to the preferences. And
Ferdinand,
yeah.
can you please put away the little pop-up screen in the right below?
There's this screen here. No, is this annoying?
Not, it's in a little bit in the way.
Yeah, I don't know where to put it. Like I can do it like this. Is this better?
No, I mean in the rectangular.
Oh,
Yes, that one. Yes, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Blender has a bunch of themes, so you can make it like brighter or darker, or have the color theme of Maya. I don't even know which one I'm using normally. I think Blender Dark is a bit dark. I like Blender Light. But you can customize any color of any button. Like whatever you see here is you can change the color or make it to your taste. And there's tons of presets. There's even presets you can download from the internet. Yeah, this is a matter of taste. Then in viewport, there's nothing special to mention. Lights, you can change like the standard lights, which is I never did. Then in editing, also nothing special. Animation. Let me quickly peek into my document. So I wrote all of this down. I think the first one we use is an input. Oh yeah, add-ons. So Blender has lots of add-ons that already come installed with Blender. But it's so many, if you would activate all of them, Blender would take ages to start. There's a whole bunch that I use very often, but normally I just disable most of the. Well, actually, I have a few that I would enable by default, but they're mostly for more advanced stuff. So for what we're doing today, we don't need any add-ons, but you should know that you can have like extra geometry, like let's say you want all the Boolean solids or the Archimedean solids, you can have that. You can have a plugin for measuring, or actually I have one that I have to install. Like it doesn't ship with Blender. It comes as a download from some website, and it's a plugin that allows me to show you which keys I'm pressing. It's called Screencast Keys. So you download a zip file, and so you don't need this right now, except if you want to do a Blender tutorial to somebody. But once I click install and then search here for screencast, I can see that it appears in the list. And if I check this little mark, then it will start in Blender. And then in input, if like right now I'm using a laptop which doesn't have the numpad. The numpad is like this part of your keyboard that is on the right side where you have like all the numbers and another plus and minus and some page up, page down. But if you're on a laptop, you might not have the numpad. So I would ask you to check this one if you don't have a numpad. If you have a numpad, uncheck this one. Actually, it's a very nice if you have a keyboard with a numpad. It makes life a lot easier in Blender. I'm close to like buying myself like an extra numpad that I can stick to my computer just for Blender. But yeah, I got used to the emulate numpad. If you have like a Macintosh mouse that doesn't have 3 buttons like my mouse, then you can click this button. So you could, instead of doing the middle mouse button, you can do like control right button. But I hope that you all have like a 3 button mouse, which is important. Like I can't imagine working properly in Blender without a mouse. Like each time I give a Blender course, somebody says, no, but I have a MacBook Pro with like the most advanced touchpad ever, and I can do this on my touchpad. I doubt it. Get a mouse for like at least 10 euros. Like, don't get one of those Chinese crappy mice, and spend like 10 euros, get a brand name that is something known, and you will have a lot more fun in Blender. You can also use a 3D mouse, which is like something you hold in your left hand, which is looks like a airplane joystick or something. But this works perfectly in Blender, and if you have a 3D mouse, I highly recommend that you use it. Like everybody I know that ever got used to a 3D mouse, they don't want to give it away again. So it gives you 2 hands instead of 1 hand, which is very advantageous. Then the next one I want to look at is in navigation. And this makes it a bit easier for beginners if you select zoom to mouse position. So whenever you zoom in or out, like if you uncheck this, Blender will just zoom in or out disregarding your mouse position. It will just zoom straight in. But if you check this one, it will zoom and pan at the same time to keep your mouse in the middle. I usually have this off, but it doesn't hurt to have it on. So I keep this. You could also change the way that things turn and move in Blender. There's like, in general, there's like 2 big philosophies in how to rotate 3D models, which is trackball or turntable. I like turntable, and yeah, I would recommend you to keep the same. This is like what most software uses. Then the next one is in key map. And this one, you will just have to trust me, but if you have a numpad, then you don't have to do anything. If you don't have a numpad, I would ask you to search for frame selected. So if you just type it up here, it will filter, and you will only see like the shortcuts that are related to frame selected. And you can see that they're sorted by the different windows, and probably in your case, under 3D view, the middle frame selected probably says numpad : here. And if you don't have a numpad, I would ask you to just click here once and then press the normal colon. If you don't have this one, if you don't have a numpad key, then you're gonna miss this one. So frame selected in 3D view. Okay, and that's it. Like I already installed the screencast keys, which you don't need. In system, you could change, like if you have a very good graphics card, you might have, if you have an NVIDIA graphics card, you can use CUDA, so it will render faster if you have like a good graphics card, because it can use resources from your graphics card, not your CPU. And but yeah, and you can put memory limits, and you can tell it how many cores of your CPU it's using. But this is, yeah, once you get into like rendering, then this will become interesting again. Yeah, and this is like, this was also a big discussion. Blender users spent years complaining that like Blender, if you closed it, it would just close. And it wouldn't ask you, oh, you didn't save. Don't you want to save? Blender was assuming that you as a user have a brain, and if you didn't save and closed it, then this was probably for a good reason. So it didn't ask you. And so since I think 2 point something, 2.7, I forgot the version, but this, after years of discussion, now Blender has the option to prompt you if you close your file without saving. Yeah, so slowly people don't have anything to complain anymore. And you can also like pre-configure your file paths. This also works if you run it from like a CD or from a pen drive, and it will remember where all your favorite textures and scripts and sound files are. I used to use this excessively, and Blender is the only program I know that can do this without using the registry from Windows. But right now I'm too lazy to configure it, and I don't, yeah. But if you're too lazy to navigate to your textures folder each time that you put a texture, you can just put it here, and then once you click on Add Texture, it will automatically go to this folder. And those preferences, you can click on Save Preferences, but right now I have this Auto Save Preferences on. So whatever you change is going to change, and it's going to be there the next time you open Blender. And if you, for some reason, mess up seriously, you can go and load the factory preferences. Yeah, but nowadays this is not such a problem anymore. Yeah, I won't go into details. Okay, so here we are in our 3D view. And I will quickly explain you what we see here. So probably the most important window in Blender is the 3D view. And if you click with your middle mouse button, so you press the mouse wheel and you move it, which makes what we call the orbit. So when you move your mouse, it will orbit the camera around your 3D object. If you rotate the mouse wheel, it will zoom in and out. And if you hold Shift and then press and move the mouse wheel, you will do a pan. So that's the three most important things in Blender: zoom, orbit, pan. And normally I would, like if this was a class with like people in my classroom, I would go around now and tell everybody, okay, show me zoom, orbit, pan. And most people like it's not that difficult, but surprisingly people have lots of difficulties with like with a zoom, orbit, pan. I think what gives most people trouble is the pan. So you have to click and hold Shift and press and move the middle mouse button. And in this perspective, it's not so obvious, but I'm moving my camera side to side. This is different than orbit. And most people don't really get the difference, and they, after a short while, they forget about pan. But I would please ask you to do what I would normally check if you're doing it right. So press the middle mouse button and move your mouse. This is the orbit. Rotate your mouse button is the zoom, and press and hold Shift. Press and hold your middle mouse button. This is pan. And yeah, please let me know if you have any difficulties with this, because since this is the very, very most important thing in Blender that you're gonna spend like 90% of your time, you're gonna be busy doing zoom, orbit, and pan. So if you don't get this right now, you're gonna have a lot of trouble in Blender.
Hi, Ferdy. I'm having a little trouble here. I'm using Linux, and I can see like my buttons are a bit different. For example, I don't have the edit. It's normal.
Which edit? A button on the screen?
Yeah. Besides the render, I have file, render, window, help.
Oh, no. Oh, okay. So you couldn't find the preferences?
Yeah.
Is it maybe you can find file preferences, because this used to be the place where the preferences used to be?
Yeah, okay. User preferences. Yes.
Yeah. So you have an older version of Blender. So Like this was another one, like the right-click select that people kept discussing for years. Blender always had the preferences under File, and since recently they're under Edit, which confused a lot of people. But yeah, but zoom orbit pan works.
Yeah, fine. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. Everybody is zooming, orbiting, and panning? Great. Yeah, I don't know how to double check this, but yeah, please let me know if you have any difficulties. It seems easy, but yeah, people seem to have a lot of trouble with it, to the point where I used to make a little handout where I wrote down all the shortcuts for Blender. But to my surprise, it's almost impossible to explain in a written way what the middle mouse button is. I don't know why it's so difficult, but if I make a little symbol with like with a mark on the middle mouse button, people only seem to understand it if they write it down themselves. So this is the moment where I would ask you to either get a piece of paper and a pencil, or to open like a little text editor and write it down for yourself. Like the preferences is nothing you have to write down. This you can look up on my website. But the shortcuts, you will have to memorize them somehow. And from my experience, the best way to memorize them is to write them down yourself. And I haven't found a way of explaining a middle mouse button drag so that people understand it. So I will quickly disappear for a second. Please get some paper or like open Notepad or some text editor and write yourself down the shortcuts for zoom, orbit, pan. So middle mouse button drag, and shift middle mouse button drag, and mouse wheel turn. I'll be back in a second. Okay, yeah, so I still remember my piece of paper where I wrote, I still have it, my very first piece of paper for Blender, and it quickly filled like 2 A4 pages, and at some point I switched over to digital because the list of shortcuts for Blender is very long. You can download like ready-made lists of shortcuts, but as I said, in the end you want to know them by heart. And the best way to learn them by heart is to write them down yourself. So yeah. Okay, so then I will have another peek in what we're going to do next. Oh yeah, so the next exercise is one where I just want you to look and not do anything. Because from experience, I know that this always ends in chaos. So what we see right now is actually not one window, but it's 1, 2, 3, 4 windows. And each window has like a little button where you can choose what type of window it is. And each of those 4 windows, I can switch the content. So for example, right now, this one is the 3D viewport. But I could also say, and this one is the, what does it say? I have to look for the symbol because they keep changing the symbol, so I don't know how it is called. But this is the timeline, okay? But I could also say, hey, no, I don't want the timeline down there. I want the 3D viewport. So now I have the 3D viewport down here as well. And I could also make this one a 3D viewport. And so I could make all of them 3D viewports, or I could also put my timeline up here if I wanted. So all the windows are interchangeable. And you can also, if you go to the line between the windows, you can change their size. And if the two windows are only split in one segment, you can right click on the line between them and say join areas, which will give you a little arrow. If you move up and down, you can decide in which direction to collapse them. So now I'm collapsing my 3D view to the top. So I will have one big 3D view to the right. And I can do the same with those two windows. So I join those two. So now I only have two windows left. And if I also join those two, I only have one big window left. Another way of, if you go to the top corner of a window, your cursor changes to this crosshair. And if you drag to the left, you can split it. And I can also drag down and split it again in this direction. And I could also drag this one over here and drag this one over here. And I can have as many 3D views as I want to have, and they're all connected. So if I move in one, all the others will move as well. So this is something that is very nice in Blender. And you can also, if I click on one and drag it into the other one, I can also quickly join them again. It takes a little bit of practice. This is why I asked you not to repeat this with me, because mostly people get it all messed up, and then yeah, and then they get confused. And I just want to let you know that it is that this is possible. You might need some time for getting used to this dragging and all of this. You can also right click on the when this crosshair appears. Oh, this stupid panels in the way. So each window has a header. Like, so this gray line on top is the header, and I can choose if I want it on the top or on the bottom. At least normally I can. Exactly. So here, no, why not? You see, even I get confused. But normally I should be able to like right click on the header and flip it to the bottom so that the header would be down here. Maybe I'm clicking in the wrong spot. We have to, no. So I divide it. And I click on the dividing line. Yeah, never mind. If you're working with multiple monitors, you might want to have another Blender window on your second monitor, and you can just rip one of those areas by where's the shortcut? So we can Control left drag. So if I hold Control and then right click and drag. No, sorry, Shift. Sorry, Shift left click and drag will separate this window. So now I could take this window, move it over to my second monitor, and then I could use the same features as always, and I can customize both of the windows. Now I'm looking for the buttons window. This is the properties window. This is one that is mostly somewhere on the right side. So now I would have this for my second monitor. I could put the 3D viewport here and move this over, and I gain another Blender without starting it twice. Close it again. And put the 3D viewport here, and just for showing you, if you control left click drag, you can switch windows. So I just go and it will switch those two windows like one to the other. It's not incredibly useful, but sometimes it's nice. And yeah, I'm surprised that I can't switch the header down. But maybe this is because of my WebEx. Like WebEx is sometimes confusing my software. But yeah, but I also hardly use it. You can make the header. You can also make it disappear, and you can switch it to the bottom. But yeah, not so important. And so up here you can see that there's like little tabs. So if I click on the modeling tab, I will suddenly have a different arrangement of windows. Same for sculpting. So here I have my sculpting tools already. For UV editing, I'm already in edit mode, and here's my UV editor and texture paint. And you can just try clicking on those. And if you change them, so let's say in this one I change my arrangement and I go to texture paint and I go back to shading, it will memorize the change. So I would recommend you to leave those more or less alone. Mostly I just stay in this one and do all my changes the way I want them in this one. But you could also add your own and give it a name and configure your workspace the way you want it. And if you quickly want to cycle through all those different layouts, you can hold Control and press the page up, page down keys. So it will just cycle through all the different workspaces that Blender has. Like Control and page up or page down. Okay. Oh, and one more useful thing is if you hold Control and hit the space bar, it will maximize the window that your mouse was over. And this is another feature that most people take some time getting used to. Blender knows where your mouse is. So in most software, if you hit a shortcut, it will do something, but independently of where your mouse position is. So right now, since my mouse is down here, Blender knows, oh, I'm in the buttons window. So if I hit Control Space, I want to maximize the buttons window. And if I'm in this window, it will maximize this one. And if I'm in here, yeah. So Blender knows where your mouse is. So if you ever do something, if you ever hit a shortcut or something, and it doesn't behave as expected, double check the position of your mouse. So each window, like many shortcuts, work in different windows, but they have, like, for example, moving would work in the UV editor. It would also work in a bunch of other windows. It wouldn't work in the buttons window because I have nothing to move. But yeah, and Blender knows where your mouse is. So if something doesn't work, double check that your mouse is in the right window. Okay, so we have cycle workspaces. We have left drag the corner to separate the window, left drag to swap window, and Control Space to maximize the area. The header flip to top, I don't know why it doesn't work for me. Ah, here, flip to top. Ta-da. Actually, it flipped it to the bottom, but yeah, now it works. I don't know why this was not working before. But yeah, stupid. Okay. So here I can completely turn the header off, so now it disappeared, and I wish. No, it doesn't come anymore. Okay, so no problem. So up here, yeah, something is weird in my place, but yeah, you can turn it on and off and flip it up or down. And if you completely messed up your Blender by now, you just go to File, New, General, and don't save, and you will get a fresh window where everything is the way it used to be. Okay, everybody back to a fresh Blender where everything looks kind of like on mine? Okay, if not, please complain. If you try to find a way to hide this stupid little thing here. Or yeah, maybe just another little, like, apart from having like several different interfaces, you also can have several scenes. So this would be the, you could work on, like a scene is kind of like another file. This is like in a movie. So you could have several scenes and you could switch between those scenes up here. Right now I only have one scene, so it's not a big deal. You could just duplicate it and make another scene, but this is also more advanced stuff. What we want to have a look at right now are, like I used to have a professor that always said, there's always three most important things. And I just told you that like zoom, orbit, pan are the three most important things. But of course, there's also like three most important things of the three most important things. And the second one of the three most important things is the views. So if you click on view and go a little bit down, you can see that under viewpoint, you can have top, bottom, front, back, right, and left. And if you click on one of those, it will reorient your 3D model so that right now I'm looking from top. And you can tell because in the corner is written top orthographic. And if I go to view, viewpoint front, it says front orthographic, and I look from the front. As a general rule of thumb for all 3D modeling programs, place your models so that those make sense. Like if my model was a mouse, then my front view would be this one, my top view would be this one, and my bottom view would be this one. Like if you put your model the wrong way around, you will have difficulties on the long run. So like for an object like a car, it's kind of obvious where front and top is, but for something like a spoon, it might not be so obvious, or for a lighter. But in the end, you have to remember it yourself where front of your object is. And if you go to the front view, you should see your object in the way you think is front. Sounds ridiculous, but please take this advice seriously. It will make your life easier. And so I go to the view button again and on viewpoint, and you can see that here in the back there's something written, which is the shortcut. So all shortcuts, they're always appended at the end of the menu item. And this one says for top, it says numpad 7. But you remember that we enabled this option in the preferences where we said emulate numpad. So in our case, like if you have a numpad, then this is numpad 7. If you mark the emulate numpad, then your regular number keys will work the same way than the numpad keys. So if I hit 1, I get the front view. If I hit 3, I will get the right view. If I hit 7, I get the top view. And that's the three most important ones that you need to know. 1, 3, and 7. And you might wonder what all the other numbers are for. And actually they also, like if you look at the numpad, they kind of make sense because it rotates your model in one direction or the other. So if I hit 2, it will slowly rotate it around the x-axis. If I hit 3, it will go to the right view. If I hit 4, it will rotate it around the z-axis. And one button that is a bit special is the number 5. And you might not really see what's happening, but you can see that up here, it changes between orthographic and perspective. Like if you have something like the cube, you can see that it kind of changes a little bit the way we see the cube. And by default, as soon as you're in like in not one of the base views, it will be in perspective. And as soon as you go to like 1, 3, or 7, it will switch to orthographic. And many times you want to have control over this. And by hitting the number 5, you can switch between those, between perspective and orthographic. And if you hit the number 0, you will go to camera view, which will show you what your camera is seeing right now. Once you in the middle mouse drag, it will leave the camera view. As you can see, here's my camera. And if I hit 0, I will see everything from the perspective from the camera. And if I hit render, it will render exactly this area that the camera is seeing. But yeah, we will talk more about this in the next session. For the moment, it's enough for us to know that we have 3 objects. One is our camera, and by just left-clicking on it, I can select an object, and it will tell me, okay, this is a light, this is a point light. If I click on this one, I get the camera, and if I click on this one, I get the cube. And depending on what you have selected, all the information in the buttons window, actually it's not called buttons window, it's called properties window. Like this information that you see here will change. So for example, if I have a camera selected and I click the camera symbol, I get all the settings for my camera. And if I click on the light, I will get all the settings for my light. And the same thing for the cube. So yeah, you can also select by clicking in the outliner. This is like this little window. This will list all the items you have in your scene, and you can also some objects have some special features, like a material or the type of light it is. So yeah, the outliner works well for selecting. You can also like shift click and select all the objects you have, or you can just click somewhere in the empty space and it will deselect all of them. Yeah, we will talk more about the outliner in the next session. I think we should make a little break at like 7:30. Maybe we make it up to here, and then we can have a little break. Okay, so we just covered like the 1, 3, 7 keys for having the right front and left view, no, right top and front view, and 0 for the camera view. We realized that we have like 3 objects in our scene, one of which is the camera and the light. And another feature that drove people crazy in Blender, and if you left-clicked in Blender, it would move this little 3D cursor. And so they recently changed this. So now you have to shift right-click. So you press the shift button, keep it pressed, and then you right-click. And this will change the position of the little crosshair, which is our beloved 3D cursor. That is something special in Blender. It's the only 3D software I know that has a 3D cursor. It's super helpful for many things. I will explain you later what you need it for. But for the moment, we want it back in the middle, like at the origin. And for getting it back to the origin, we have to hit Shift S. And this opens one of those funky menus where we can choose one of the items just by dragging our mouse in the right direction. And so what we want is cursor to world origin. So Shift S, and since you see the number, I could either hit 1 or just click on it, or just if you're getting used to those, you can just, if you remember the direction, if you just quickly move in this direction, the menu will automatically disappear. So if you go check, it's a quick way of, they call them pie menus. I don't know where the pie is, but yeah, that's the pie menu. And you have pie menus for many things, which we will cover in a moment. Okay, so our 3D cursor is back to the center. We know that we can shift right click for putting it somewhere else. We can use our 1, 3, and 7 keys for getting a different perspective. And we could, like for example, if I wanted to manually place it exactly where my lamp is, I could shift right click on the lamp, change my view, shift right click on the lamp again, and also check in all the different views. And now I have it more or less precisely where my lamp is. So many times, if you're moving stuff around in Blender, you toggle between those 3 different views, and then it's easier to orient stuff in the right way. You could also make yourself another 2 windows, so you could have like the top view in here, the right view in here, and the front view in here. And 1, okay. You can see like top, right, front. And now if I do something in this view, I can confirm how like for example, if I move something in this view, I can't move it up and down, but I can see my up and down movement in this view. But yeah, we will get to the movement in just a second. Yeah, let's have a short break until 7:30, and then we continue. Then we get the third one of the 3rd most important things of Blender, which is move, rotate, and scale. Except if you have any question, then this would be the moment.
Hello, can you show me the method to use the circle, the circle menu? I didn't realize how it works.
You hold Shift and S at the same time, and then and make sure that your mouse is in the 3D window.
Shift
like
and
this is always the problem.
okay. Yes, thank you.
Move your mouse so that it's in the 3D view, and then hit Shift S, and then this pie menu should open.
Okay.
And then you just select one of them. Yeah, don't worry. Like this is in the beginning. You will get this wrong a few times with the mouse position. But yeah, whenever something is not doing what you want, double check where your mouse is. So by now you should have a little piece of paper that says that explains to yourself how to do the orbit, the pan, and the zoom. The shortcuts for moving the windows and stuff you don't really have to write down. But you should remember the 1, 3, and 7 keys, and the 5 for toggling to orthographic, and the 0 for the camera. You should remember that you use the left mouse button for selecting objects, that you use the Shift right click to position the 3D cursor, and Shift S for moving the cursor to the origin. If you don't have your piece of paper ready yet, then take the chance in the break. If there's no more questions, I see you in 5 minutes. Okay? Okay, I'm back again. Sorry, I didn't see all the messages in the chat because I was sharing my screen. So it looks like Lucio is still looking for her mouse. Well, you can, if you can't find it right now, you can try to follow without a mouse, but it will, yeah, you should definitely get a mouse. And Adriana lost the steps with 1, 3, and 7.
Don't worry, I
So
will buy one, a mouse. I just looked all afternoon, and for tonight it was too fast.
okay, don't worry. Like you have a trackpad? Are you on a laptop?
Yeah, I have a laptop with a trackpad, and I can handle this everything you
Yeah.
do. But I'm just a bit toggling with when you say middle mouse button. I'm like, yeah, well, I'm not really sure what I'm doing, but I'll find out next week. Don't worry.
I think if you have a modern trackpad where you also have the the 3-finger swipe, I
Mhm.
think the 3-finger swipe is the orbit, and left and right click to what I'm used to, but doing the middle mouse click is the button at the like you might want to try looking it up on the internet. I think it used to be a pain, but if you have a modern trackpad, it is possible to make it work with a trackpad as well. But
I'll get. Don't worry about me.
and I will share my screen again, and I will just quickly comment on the different keyboards. So like the standard computer keyboard has this numpad here, which are those bunch of keys. But on a laptop, like on this one, you don't. The numpad is missing. So this is the reason for this emulate numpad in the preferences. So if you have like a Magic Keyboard or a laptop, you use the once you hit this emulate numpad, those number keys will do what those number keys are doing. Like normally those number keys, they switch between different layers, or now they're called collections. So if you don't have the emulate numpad and you hit number 1, it will turn on your collection number 1 and collection number 2 and so on. You can also shift select several collections for seeing them at the same time. But once you hit the emulate numpad, those won't switch between collections anymore, but they will do the views the same way that the numpad would normally do them. The only odd one is this one, but this is where we changed in the keyboard shortcuts that instead of using this colon for frame selected, we're using this colon for frame selected. So this was one of the little changes we made, but this is only for the ones that don't have a numpad. So I will go back to File, New, General, and we should all see the same screen. And now we're getting to the third of the 3 most important things in Blender, which is move, rotate, and scale. And somehow this is not disappearing. Stupid WebEx. No. Okay, now you should see me, and there's still this annoying little panel, but I will just put it here. Okay, so if you, I will just quickly explain what we see in our main window, which is the 3D viewport. So on the left side, we have the select box. We have the cursor, so you could also move your cursor with the left mouse button. If you click on this one before, again, Shift S, cursor to world origin for undoing this. And then here we have move, rotate, and scale. So if I click the move button and I have my cube selected, then there's like a few arrows appearing, and I can click and drag the arrows for moving my object. If you do something that you want to undo, Control Z works for undoing whatever you do. And you have, I think it's an almost unlimited number of undos, so you can always go back until the very first thing you did. I think in the preferences you can change how many undos you have, but I never run out of undos, so don't worry. And so please try just like moving your cube a little bit around. And if you're still in the action of moving something and you hit escape, it will just cancel whatever you did. So if I'm clicking and dragging on my up and down button, it will do this. The same is true for the right mouse button. So if I'm here, I'm holding my left mouse button, but if I hit the right mouse button at the same time, it will do the same as hitting escape. So you should try that. And the right mouse button always works the same as escape. You just click, and while it must be while you're moving. So once I released the mouse button, and right mouse button will do right mouse button again. So I would have to hit Control Z for undoing this. And you can also tell that there's like in between those arrows, there's like a little square. And if you click and drag the square with the left mouse button, it will move in this plane. So now it's moving in the YZ plane. If I hit the blue square, it will move in the XY plane. So just like horizontally. And the same is true for this one, which would be the ZX plane. Okay? Maybe undo until I'm back in the middle. And yeah, and so the rotate works in a very similar way. So once I hit the rotate button, I see instead of straight arrows, I see round arrows. And if I click and drag on the red one, I will rotate it around the x-axis. Again, right-click to cancel. If I click and drag on the blue one, it will rotate horizontally. And if I drag on the green one, it rotates around the y-axis. And if I click on the white circle around it, it will rotate perpendicular to my screen. So around an axis that is like my viewing direction. Okay. So just by clicking those buttons here, I can switch moving, rotating. So if I have this scale, I can select it. The arrows look a bit different, and I can scale like only in the Z direction, or only in the Y direction, or in all directions, or in one plane. And if I click the white circle, it will scale the same way in all directions. Actually, this is much more visible if my cube is in its default orientation. But before explaining you how to get back to the default orientation, I will also show you that you can, like right now I only see the scaling icons, but if I want to quickly toggle between those, there's also a way I can see all those symbols at the same time, which is here. So if I shift, if I select all of those, and no. Okay, there's also a way where you can have all three like those arrows are called gizmos, and you could have all the gizmos at the same time, which is, I think, rather annoying. And what I normally do is I turn all the gizmos off. I don't like the gizmos. They get in my way, so I can just click on this one, and so the gizmos are gone. But now you will say, hey, but then how do I move my object? And this is the important part, and this is probably the most important lesson of our class today, which is the buttons G for grab, which does the same as this arrow, R for rotate, which lets me rotate my object, and S for scale. Okay. For me, yeah, it's G, R, and S. So you should definitely write down those shortcuts, and I'm sure I have them written down somewhere here. And I think it's on my website. Yeah, so grab, rotate, scale, G, R, and S. And those, like in the beginning, most people don't remember those shortcuts, and they keep like dragging on the screen, and like it used to work that you can move something just by dragging it with the left mouse button. So people would always move stuff just by dragging, which luckily now doesn't work anymore, and they would forget the shortcuts. But I very highly recommend you to memorize those 3 letters, grab, rotate, scale, because they will allow you to work a lot faster in Blender. And if I want to undo any rotational change I did, I can hold Alt and then hit the G key, so it will move it back to its original position. The same is true for rotation. So if I hit Alt R, it will go back to its original rotation, and Alt S will take it back to its original size. Okay. So once we get used to those shortcuts, we can do a lot. There's a lot more tricks hidden under this shortcut. And one of the things that Blender is special is normally if you execute a shortcut, like let's say for file new, it would be Control N. Yeah, you hit those buttons at the same time. But Blender not only accepts shortcuts that you press at the same time, but there's also shortcuts that go sequentially. So if I hit G, my object moves parallel to my screen. But if I hit X now, it will restrict the movement only to the X-axis. And if I change my mind and I hit Y now, it will only move in the Y-axis. And the same is true for the Z-axis, which makes it move only up and down. Again, if I hit Escape, it will go back to where it was before. And this also works like if you move your mouse in like now I'm moving along the Y-axis, and if I hit G now while I'm moving in this direction, and I hit the middle mouse button for a second, then it will recognize, you moved in the Y direction when you hit the middle mouse button, so probably you want to constrain it to this direction. If I hit the middle mouse button again, I'm free, and if I move now in the X direction and hit my middle mouse button, it will constrain it in this direction, or in the up and down, it will quickly constrain it just in the Z direction. So this is a very quick way. You don't even have to press any keyboard keys. You just make a gesture where you want to go while you're moving it, and then press middle mouse button, and it will constrain you in this axis. And escape or right button to cancel, or just left click for accepting this command. And once I moved like a little piece and I want to go back to the original position, I hold Alt and G and it will go back to where it was. Same is true for scaling. So if I hit S, it will scale my object in all directions. And one thing I quickly want to note is the scaling works differently depending on how close my mouse cursor is to the center of the object. You see in the center, there's this little, like if I move it, you can see it better. There's this little dot in the middle. This is my object origin. And if I'm very close to the object origin and I hit S, it will very quickly scale a lot. If I move my mouse further away from the object origin and hit S there, the scaling is a lot more, how do you say, I can scale more accurately. And if I'm too close, it's really, let's say I want to make it twice the size, and if I'm here, I move my mouse a millimeter and it's already super big. But if I hit S while I'm somewhere far away, I have much more control over how much I'm scaling. And another thing to know is that Blender doesn't care about the limits of your screen. Like if you leave your screen on the left side, it will come back in on the right side. So you can keep moving and moving and moving it. You will never hit the border of your screen. It's very nice, I think. And so I hit Alt G, I go back to the origin, and Alt S, and I go back to my original size. And now let's try the scaling in hitting S and then hitting X, Y, or Z. So now I hit S and then X, so it only scales in X direction. If I hit Y now, it will only scale in Y direction. And I hit Z, and it will only scale in Z direction. Okay. Any questions regarding this? Is this working good for everybody? Okay, no answer?
Yeah. Perfect.
Perfect. Okay. And you probably guessed it already. We used scale and grab so far. But we can also do the same for rotate. So if I hit R, my object will rotate around an axis perpendicular to the screen. And if somewhere in the middle I hit X now, it will only rotate around the X-axis. And if I hit Y, it will only rotate around the Y-axis. And the same is true for the Z-axis. And I want you to know that like once I'm in the rotate dialog, you will see that up here it says rot, and it gives you an angle, right? Same is true for moving. If I hit G, I can see now that I'm moving in like 3 directions at the same time. Once I hit X, I only get 1 coordinate because it tells me it's moving along global X. Here I'm moving in the positive direction, so I get a positive number. And once I cross the 0 point, it's going to move in the negative direction. Once again, GX, yeah. So I can see a number changing up there. And so right now, like my hands are not touching the mouse, but I'm still in the grab mode. So when I move the mouse, it will move, and I can see the number. And now I'm free to write a number. So I will write, and I just click the number keys, like the ones that we normally use for changing our viewport. And if I hit the number 2 and then enter, my object moved 2 units in the X direction. And if I do GX again, and I write -2 enter, it will move back 2 units in the X direction. So I'm back to the beginning. So if I wanted to move 3 units in the Y direction, I know that Y positive is like this way. So I could hit G, then Y, and then type 2 and enter. Yeah? And for undoing this, I would write G, Y, -2, and I'm back at the beginning. Does this make any sense? I hope so. Let's try it with rotation. So let's say I want to rotate my cube 45 degrees around the Z-axis, which is this one. So I hit R, Z, I write 45, enter, and here's my cube rotated exactly 45 degrees. And same is true if I want to go back. So I hit R, Z, -45, and I'm back at the beginning. So yeah, so now's the moment. You probably guessed it. If I want to have it twice as long in Y direction, I would hit S, Y, 2, enter. And now my object is twice as long in Y direction. And if I do S, Y 0.5, the beginning. So yeah, so my task is to just like get this. Move your object 2 units in X direction, GX2, enter, then move it a little bit up, GZ3, enter, then rotate it by 23 degree, RZ23, enter, and just practice this a little bit. Normally I would go around now and tell each one, okay, move your cube 2 units in X direction. Then I would go to the next one and say, rotate it by 45 degrees in Y direction. And I would just go around the classroom and give everybody a task and see if they understand it. Right now I can't go around, so you will just have to like try yourself. And please let me know if you have any difficulties.
Just a question. At the beginning, in the move option, you always say I right click and back to the beginning, and I missed that. I can do Control Z, but
yeah.
Right click.
Okay.
Because right click it's a menu.
Yeah. So now I have my cube and I hit the G key. And so now my cube moves whenever I move the mouse. If I left click now, it will stay where I left it. If I move it and I'm still in the move mode, which I can see because there's the numbers up here that are changing. If I decide that I want to cancel my movement, I hit the right mouse button. And so it jumps back to the original position. If you hit the left mouse button, it confirms. If you hit the right mouse button, it cancels. But the same thing works with escape. So if I moved over here and hit escape, it jumps back to the beginning. Explain it? Okay. Hola José, by the way. Okay, so yeah, I hope you're all busy practicing moving certain amounts. You could also get used to the comma, like you can move like 2.5 units in a direction. You can just write it the same way you would write numbers in a Word document. And one thing that most people have difficulties with is the enter at the end. Like your command will only finish once you hit enter. So whenever you're using this numerical input, don't forget the enter. Oh, I'm seeing messages in the chat. Sorry. So, Antonio, what is the way to center an object? I'm not sure if I understand right. Like one way for getting it back to the center would be the Alt-G. Oops. Alt-G, which moves it back to its original position, and Alt-R and Alt-S for resetting all the transformations back to the original ones. So this would be a way to center it. There's other ways of moving it to a certain position. So let's say my object is here. I could do the Shift S that we used before, and I could say selection to cursor, which would also center it. It will center it over the 3D cursor. And since our 3D cursor is in the middle, it will put it back to the middle. there's probably another 3-4 ways of doing this, but I hope this explains it. So Shift S is a useful shortcut for many things. It gives you all these options here. So I could also move my 3D selection to cursor. Those are similar. Cursor to grid. This would, if I have my 3D cursor somewhere like not exactly at the intersection of those lines, then I hit Shift S and cursor to grid, it will like jump it to the next intersection of the grid. And cursor to world origin, this is already what we know. If I moved my object, I can also move my 3D cursor exactly to where my selected object is. So now my 3D cursor jumps to the center of this one. I will put it back. Or I could put my selection to the 3D cursor, so same thing the other way around. And I could also make my object jump to the grid and selection to active. I don't know, I would have to put this one. Okay, so just as a reminder, so middle mouse button, drag is the orbit, shift is the drag, shift is the pan, and zoom. And now we also learned the G, R, and S. And we know that we can constrain it to a certain axis by either indicating where we want to go and then hit the middle mouse button, or by hitting the respective X, Y, Z keys. Okay, I hope this makes any sense. And yeah, you can get like using the numerical input, we can work very precisely and achieve something that is not just somewhere, but somewhere. Yes, I'm hearing somebody. No. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So this was an important part. Like if you have any difficulties up to now, you should definitely tell me, because from now on it will only get easier. No? Okay. So let's advance a little bit. I think we're good in time. We still have another hour left. Like somebody should either speak up or mute. Okay. So right now we only have one object. No, actually we have 3 objects. We have a light, a camera, and a cube. And if you want to add more objects, we can use this little add button here. And so let's add a few more meshes. So a mesh is the thing we were talking about in the very beginning. It's a polygonal mesh. So it's something made out of a lot of little triangles. And we have some like pre-made meshes, one of which is the cube that we already have. And I would want you to add a cylinder. Just a sec, I saw that there's something in the chat. If you make a mistake with rotating, can you put the object back to the original? No. Yeah, if you moved something out of the way, sorry. If you moved something and you want it back to its original position, you hit Alt and G for the position. If you scale it and you want back to the original scale, you hit Alt S. I think Gerhard has to mute his microphone. And if you rotate something and you want it back to the original rotation, you hit Alt R. Okay? I hope this explains it. So now we have 2 objects, and by default, if you add a new object, it's added at the 3D cursor. And since it's in the middle, it's kind of like overlapping now with our first cube. And so we want to move it up a little bit. And as you know already, for moving it, I hit the G key. And for moving it only but now it's like moving all over the place. And if I only want to move it up, I hit the Z key, and now I can move it only in the Z direction. But right now it's kind of difficult. Like I want to put it on top of the box, but I can't really see it well. So this is why I'm going to change into another view. So I hit the number 1. So now I'm in front view. And if I hit GZ now, I can perfectly see what I'm doing, and I can move it on top. And I can also see that, oh, actually the cube is probably like 2 units high. So if I hit 2, enter, then I have it sitting like perfectly exactly on top of the cube. Okay. Maybe I'll repeat this. Oh yeah, actually, so deleting stuff is just with the delete key. If you hit just delete, it will disappear without asking. If you hit the X key, it will ask you for confirmation. So if I hit delete X and then delete, it will also delete it. And so I go again to object, to add mesh cylinder. Then I see my cylinder, more or less. Then I hit number 1 for being in front view. And now I hit GZ for moving it up. Okay. Let's add another object.
Sorry, Ferdi, just a quick question. So sorry to interrupt you. How you moved it, but you moved it dynamically. You are not sure, like mathematically sure that it's sitting on top of the cube. No, it's just a visual.
Yeah, right now there's a little gap because I didn't pay attention. Like
Okay.
if I undo and I hit GZ2, enter, now I moved it exactly 2 units, and now it's like
Okay,
perfectly on top.
because you know it's 2 units.
Yeah.
Okay, you don't have a snap or something like that.
You have a snap as well. The snap is up here. We'll get to the snapping in a.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah. No, that's fine. Like, please ask me, interrupt me. Like, that's what I'm here for.
Thank you.
Okay. So let's just for showing you, like, if I shift right click for moving my 3D cursor, and I go to add, and I add a mesh, which is a cone, it will appear right at the spot where my 3D cursor was. And yeah, just for you to know, like objects will get inserted exactly where the 3D cursor is. And if I don't want to click on add all the time, I can also use Shift A, which will open a context menu right where my mouse is. And then I can directly choose which one I want. So this is another shortcut to write down Shift A for adding an object. Oh, is the sound bad? Yeah, I hope you can all still hear me. If not, please let me know in the chat. Now I have it open on the side and I can actually see it. Okay, let's add a torus. And maybe you haven't recognized yet, but when you add an object, there's this little symbol appearing to the bottom left. I will go slowly so that you can all like focus on this down here. And if I hit this little arrow, and it pops open, and I can see all the properties of my torus. So I can see the location in like X and Y direction. I want it to be right in the middle, so it's 0. Oh yeah, actually in Blender, all the number inputs, you can either drag with your mouse over the number input. You can also use those little arrows for moving. Or if you click in it, you can just write a value and hit enter, and it will update the value. And so right now we are like, this is all like not very important if you have exactly the same numbers than me, but what we can here is the major radius and the minor radius. Oops. So if I change the major radius, the torus gets bigger as a whole. And if I change the minor radius, it just changes the size of the hole. So I will make mine like a little bit smaller so that it fits on top of the cone. And you can also see that it's kind of faceted, you know. I see all these little squares.
Excuse me.
And you can, yeah.
Kelly, how do you enter this menu on your left side now? When you add the torus, how we get the window? Okay, add torus.
If I delete my torus again and I do Shift A, Mesh, Torus,
yes,
then this little window appears down here.
Okay, thank you.
And if I click on the little triangle, then it makes it big.
Okay.
And with the major and minor segments, I can change the amount of subdivisions I have in this direction. Try changing those, but don't put numbers that are very high. Like if you put numbers that are too high, your computer will crash because this takes more memory, and your amount of memory is probably limited. So I will, but as you can see, like if I increase this number here, it will get a bit smoother in the roundness. And if I change the number of segments here, it will get more subdivisions in this direction. I can also, making the number smaller is never a problem, so I can go down to 3. And I could also make this one just 3, so I would get, I don't know what the mathematical shape is, but I would get something like this. And the more segments I put, the nicer it looks, so to say. And if I want to get rid of those segments, the easiest way is to right-click and choose Shade Smooth. The shading is something that doesn't really change anything on the geometry, it just changes the way we see it. So if I click on Shade Smooth, suddenly it looks a lot nicer. Same is true for the cone. So if I select the cone, I right-click, Shade Smooth, then I don't see those facets anymore. And same for the cylinder, Shade Smooth, but now I don't see any facets, but it looks kind of weird. And I will show you in a second on how to correct this. But I'm kind of annoyed because now I want to see only the cylinder, but all the other objects are in the way. And there's a solution for that, which is the local view. And this is the numpad \. Yeah, so if I hit this one, let me see. No, yeah. You can define a shortcut. For the moment, we just use the menu. And now you can see that up here, it says local, because now I'm in a local view where I only see the object that I selected. Oh, Ahmed is leaving. Okay. Bye-bye. And I wanted to show you one more little thing, which has to do with the smooth and flat shading. There's something in between the two, which is called auto smooth. And you can find this if you click here on the object data properties, and then under normals. And if I select auto smooth, suddenly my facets are gone, but I still see like the sharp corner on top. And here I can adjust at which angle it starts to do the auto smoothing. Usually I leave it at 30 degrees. Yeah. So this is a property that each of your objects can have. And it makes sense for objects that have round parts and sharp corners. And now I want to leave my local view. So I go back on view, local view, and toggle local view. So now I see everything again.
And Ferdinand?
Yeah?
If I now want to change that torus again, where can I find the properties of the inner and the outer diameter?
You can't go back. Like that's kind of a pity, but once you changed something, like once you moved it or something, there's no way back.
Okay.
You have to delete it and make a new one. There is tricks for going around this, but maybe this is a bit too advanced for the very first time.
No, that's okay. Cool.
Yeah. Okay, so now we have our little stack. Did you all manage to place them on top of each other? Oh wait, I have a good idea. Like I usually do this exercise. So we make a new file. Go back to file new general. Don't save. And I go to the top view by hitting 7. I shift right click for putting my 3D cursor somewhere else. I hit Shift A, or I go to Add, Mesh, and I take the cylinder. I could adjust it if I wanted, but for the moment I just leave it. Now I shift right click somewhere else. I go to Add, Mesh, and let's take the cone again. And I add Mesh, torus. Oh, now I put it on top of each other, but yeah, I will just G and move it like over here. Okay. And so this is a good exercise for getting used to the moving commands. Now I have them sitting next to each other. Stack them up in the middle again. How do I do this? Basically, I could do it by just going G, Y, no wait, X, and then a G, Z, and doing it like this, but it's kind of tedious. Probably the easiest way is to go into top view, and first I just move everything in the middle, just with the G key, G, 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 G. And now I move to the front view, and I can see they're all stuck inside each other. And now I can do G key and move them only in the Z direction in order to place them nicely. Now I see that this one is a bit misaligned, so I can go in this view, it looks kind of all right. And then I switch to a perpendicular view with 3, and then I can adjust it here. And I can do the same for all the other objects. So it's very common to change between those views 1, 3, and 7 all the time. Like this is basically the only way you can properly align stuff without having the ability to move in two things at the same time. The smooth properties, if you right click on an object and you say shade smooth, then it will make it smooth. This works perfect for the torus. For the cylinder, it doesn't work so well because it has like smooth edges and flat edges. So I go down here to the object data properties. Like make sure the object that you want is selected. You click on object data properties, then you click on normals and then on auto smooth. Okay. Awesome. Yeah, this is actually as far as I wanted to get today. So we're doing good. We have time for questions. Actually, we might also like go one step further. Like the one thing that I didn't like about the session today is that if we finish here, you can add objects and stuff, but you still don't know how to model anything, which is kind of a pity because this is where it starts getting fun. But since we have so much time, we could also like try adding other objects. Let's just get familiar with our favorite model, which is the monkey. So I go mesh monkey, and this gives me an object that is called Suzanne. So you can see the name up here, and I put myself in front view by hitting 1, and I move Suzanne up, by hitting the G key and moving the mouse. And here we are, this is Suzanne. So Suzanne is in Blender since 2.28. It was modeled by a Dutch guy, which was inspired by a very stupid movie. I forgot the name. It's one of those American, like, I don't know what movies. And there's an orangutan which is called Suzanne, and this gave the name to Suzanne. How did I move the cursor? I moved it by shift right-clicking. You see? Shift right-clicking moves the 3D cursor. Oh, and now I'm realizing that Suzanne is not in the middle, so I hit the number 7, and now I can move her right on top of everything. And here she is, our beautiful Suzanne. And you can tell, like, she's very faceted. Like, even if I go to shade smooth, she doesn't look very, very smooth. And this is where our subdivision surface modeling comes in. So everything that we're doing so far, oh yeah, like if I add Suzanne, like I go a few steps back, I will shift right click for positioning my 3D cursor in the front view and in the right view. So now I'm sure that it's like somewhere here. Then I add mesh monkey. And this one also gives me some options. And I could change the size and I could change the location, but that's it. Like I can't change the number of subdivisions. Oh, there's no way of going back to a perspective with the numbers. You just middle click and drag. This will put you in perspective automatically. So if I'm in front view, front orthographic, and now I middle click and drag, it takes me to perspective. Okay. And so the big trick that is used in all 3D movies you've seen so far is called subdivision surface. And for the subdivision surface is a modifier, and the modifiers are here where the little icon with the wrench is. So if I click the wrench icon, I can see that I have Suzanne selected. So whatever I do here is going to be applied to the currently active object. And if I open this drop down, I can choose subdivision surface. And I leave this open for a second so that everybody that's a bit behind can catch up. Or maybe I'll just make it twice to repeat it. So once I hit subdivision surface, I can see that the monkey looks a bit smoother. And this is another one of those fields. You can change the number, but don't put very high numbers. Like change them like very carefully. If you put 100 here, your computer will crash. So what the subdivision surface does, it makes out of 1 square, it makes 4 squares. So it divides it in the middle, and at the same time, it interpolates a little bit between the points so that they get smoother. And I can change the subdivision level independently for the viewport, so for stuff I see here, and for the render. Many times you want maybe a lower subdivision level for what you see on screen, so that you can still, like the higher you put this number, the slower your computer will get. But for the render, you can put a higher number. It will take longer to render, but it's not as annoying as if your screen is constantly lagging. So let's put maybe 2 in both of them. Now you can see that Suzanne looks a lot smoother already. And if I right click and shade smooth as well, we have a beautiful Suzanne that looks like a baby's bum. Okay. And since we're doing so good in time, I will already open the next chapter, except if there are any questions right now.
Yes, I have a question. If you have I will exemplify with this cube. If you have the cube and you can extend it in the z-axis, but if you rotate the cube, can you extend in the axis of the shape instead of the origin?
So let's say I have this cube here, and I scale it in z direction, like this.
No, instead of scaling in the z direction after rotating, if you extend the z, it will distort like this. But can you extend this part?
Yeah. So this is a concept that is a few steps ahead, but I will show you. So like I will just scale it in some direction so that we see what's going on, and I will just rotate it a little bit. And now, if I wanted to make it longer, I would have a problem, because if I do scale z, now it's not working anymore. And this is because we are in the global coordinate system. I could change this here to local. And now if I hit scale in y, x, I could make it longer and shorter.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
So you can always choose between the local and the global transformations. Another trick for switching quickly between local and global, if I do G and hit X twice. I do a scale, and then I hit XX. See how it changed?
Yeah.
So I hit GX once, and it would want to. I hit scale X once, and it wants to scale in this direction. But if I hit X again, it will switch to the local coordinate system, and I can scale it in its local axis. This is also super handy. Let's say if you want to move the camera, and I just want to move it closer to my object. If I try to move it closer just with X and Y, it's kind of difficult. But if I hit G, Z, Z, then it will only move like in the local Z direction of the camera, which is a good trick for moving the camera.
Yeah, okay, great. Thank you.
So usually I don't touch this one up here. I just use the double X or double Y or double Z trick. So I don't, like, sometimes I forget this one and then it gets it gets annoying. Okay, and now this one is all messed up. So I hit Alt G, Alt R, Alt S, and it's back to where it was. And of course I could also, if I, guess what happens if I apply a subdivision surface modifier to a cube? Turns to a sphere. The higher I put the number, the more spherical it becomes. And of course I could do the same to this one. So it makes it look like a pumpkin. Okay, I undo this.
Sorry, Ferdi.
Yeah.
Quick question. I think I lost you had that shade smooth thing for the ones that have the rounded faces and the flat ones.
Yeah.
I don't remember.
So if I have a shape like the cube, and if I hit shade smooth, it kind of looks a bit weird because I don't see this edge anymore. If I go back to flat, it looks nice. In the case of a cube, it doesn't make a difference because there's all the corners are 90 degrees. In the case of the cylinder, if I shade it flat, I can see all those segments. And if I go to shade smooth, the segments disappear. But oh yeah, actually this one already looks perfect because I went here to the object data properties and I checked auto smooth. If I uncheck this, it kind of looks a bit weird again.
Cool, thanks.
And now, big moment, and we're gonna enter into edit mode. So if you select the monkey, you can see up here right now we are in object mode, which means that all our shortcuts for moving, rotating, scaling, they all apply to the object as a whole. as soon as we click here and go to edit mode, the display of my monkey changes, and I can see lots of little vertices. So those little yellow dots, they're called vertices. The lines that connect the vertices are called edges. And as soon as I have 3 edges, I can make a face, which would be this one. And I can select a vertex, and I can just move it with the same commands that we learned before. So G would move it. Or if I select a bunch of vertices by holding Shift while I'm selecting, I can scale them, I can rotate them, I can do all the things that we learned in object mode, but in this case we do it for like the sub-objects, which are the vertices. And I can also choose if I want to select only vertices. So if you look to the top left, there's 3 little symbols, and I can choose between vertices, edges, and faces. So for example, right now I'm in face select mode, so I can click on a face and it will select the face I clicked on, which is equivalent to selecting the 3 vertices that make up the face. If I go to edge select mode, I can select those edges in between the vertices. And selecting 4 edges is the same as selecting one face. So if I have those 4 edges selected and I go to face select mode, it still has the same selection because it's the same thing. In the end, what you're doing is you're always selecting vertices. It's just that those two make it easier to select more vertices at a time. You can also shift click on those. So now I'm in vertex, edge, and face select mode at the same time. And now depending on what I click on, it either selects just the vertex or the edge or the whole face. Okay, so this is, I know that it's a lot to take in, but once you get this, then we're almost there. Like this is, once you grab this concept, then you're doing very good. And the shortcut for switching between edit mode and object mode is the tab key. And the tab key is the one over the caps lock. It has like this one here. Yeah. This is going to be your new favorite key because you can quickly switch to object mode. Let's see object mode. I hit tab and I'm in edit mode. In 3D Studio Max, this takes you like 3 clicks and you have to wait in between. In Blender, this is super quick and I can just do this all day and it never gets boring. Okay, so new thing to become aware of, you can be in different modes. Like there's a few modes more, but the 2 basic modes that we are going to use is the object mode, tab, and the edit mode. Okay, and let's start a new file. File new, general, and save. I hit tab for going to edit mode of our cube. And if I click somewhere outside, it deselects all the vertices. I can select single vertices by clicking on them. I can select several by shift clicking on them. And I can select a whole bunch of them by hitting the B key. So B is like for box select. So if I hit B, a little cursor appears and I can draw a rectangle and it will select everything that is inside of this square. But it will only select everything inside the square that is visible. And you can tell like this vertex was not visible, so it doesn't select it. I click away again and I put myself in some perspective, and I want to select everything, including the ones that I don't see. There's two ways. The easiest one is probably by clicking on this one. So if I click here, it goes to what they call X-ray mode. So if I do B now, it selects everything. Yeah. If I click away, it will deselect everything. I can remove the X-ray mode, and I just quickly show you all the other selection tools you have. So B is for box select, which is super useful. Like you will use it all the time. And if you want to quickly deselect everything, you can either click somewhere outside, or you hit the A key, which will first select everything. And if you hit it twice, it will deselect everything. So A selects everything, AA deselects everything. And if I hit the C key, I will enter what is called the circle select mode. And I get this little circle around. And if I left click and drag, it will select everything that I drive over. If I do the same with the middle mouse button, it will deselect everything that I drive over. And if I hit the right mouse button, it will leave the circle select mode. Yeah. So C for circle select. But while I'm in circle select mode, I can't navigate. Like there's no way of rotating my model. I have to right click, rotate, and then hit C again if I want to select the others. And if I rotate my mouse wheel, I can make the circle smaller or bigger. So if I want to select something very tiny, I can make my circle super small. And if I want to have it bigger, I can select those 4 at the same time and right click or escape for leaving the circle select mode. And AA for deselecting everything. If you hold Control while left click dragging, sorry, right click dragging, you can draw like this lasso, which also is for selecting. AA, Control, right click is the lasso select. But you will practice this a lot in the next Sunday. So don't worry if this is a bit confusing right now, but I just quickly wanted to show you all the possible selection methods you have, starting with like shift clicking on vertices, advancing to B for box selecting, and C for circle selecting, and Control right clicking for making the outline. Right. So this is in most softwares, there's only one way to select stuff. Blender has 4 of them. So there's lots of ways of selecting stuff, because selecting stuff and moving it around is one of the main tasks. And another big one is the extrude. So I go to the face select mode and select one of the faces. And I wait a second to make sure that everybody is there. Please let me know if you have any difficulties. Okay, so I have my face selected. I am in edit mode. And I hit the E key. E like Emil or ABCD, E. E like extrude. And once I hit E, I can see this blue line appearing. And if I move my mouse, it will start growing. And once I left click, it just extruded one face. I do this again and again and again. I can extrude as many faces as I want. And I can also just select another face and extrude this one or this one or this one. And you probably guessed it, if I hit extrude, and then enter a number, I can extrude exactly 2 units. And if I extrude this one exactly 2 units and then hit the S key for scaling, I can make it a bit smaller. And if I extrude this face and I hit RZ45, I can rotate it a little bit. And then I can extrude this one and rotate it in Z direction by -45, and then back to the original rotation. And I created this funky geometry. And I can also extrude faces that are not flat, like this one. And I can make it smaller. Or I can just pick a random face and make it bigger. And yeah. So this is how all 3D models are made. You pick stuff and you extrude it. And if I do the same thing when I'm in the edge select mode, and if I only extrude one edge, I get a face, which right now is not, it doesn't form a volume that we cannot 3D print because there's no volume in it. But it's just for showing you that this is completely possible. And if you select only a vertex and extrude this one, you get an edge. And if you select, if I extrude 2 edges and I select those 4 points and hit the F key, and you're probably moaning already, yet another shortcut. Isn't there like a menu for that? And of course, there's a menu for everything I tell you. And in this case, it would be, so far I showed you. So I click on the mesh menu. And to be honest, I hardly ever use those menus because this takes ages. Like F is just much quicker. So here's our extrude face, the E button that I just showed you. But I can't find the F key. It must be somewhere here. Ah, here. New edge from vertices. So if I have 3 or 4 vertices selected and I hit F, it will make a new face. Yeah. And any problems so far? I'm sure you're all cursing and telling me that I'm crazy, but don't worry. Like once you're this far, it's starting to get fun. So maybe let's make a new file. Let's start over so we catch all the ones that are lagging behind. So I go to File, New, General. And I have my cube. I'll wait a second until everybody is back to the cube. I hit the Tab key or switch here to Edit mode. I go to Face Select and I select a face, whichever one you want. You might have to rotate your view a little bit with the middle mouse button drag so you can probably see it. And then you would either remember E for extrude, or you would go to Face, Extrude Faces. And you move your mouse key. And up here you can see how far we're moving. And for the moment I just move it like any amount that I like. And do it again. And once I have a few faces, I can start to get creative. If I put myself in a side view, I could decide to rotate this face a little bit and then extrude it. And I keep doing this for like creating something that is kind of roundish. And maybe extrude this one. And I could also select two faces and scale them a little bit, either by here on scale or just in the S key. This would make them smaller. And I could also make a hole by extruding it to the inside. Yeah. And maybe I don't like the way this looks, so I can just select it and scale it in the Z direction, which would scale global Z direction. But if I hit Z twice, it would scale it in the local Z direction, which would just make it smaller in this direction. And yeah, I guess we just use the last 20 minutes so that everybody like goes wild and extrudes the hell out of whatever they have on screen. And next time we're gonna make like a little character model, and we're gonna learn a whole bunch of tricks more on how to work with meshes. But I just want to have some fun, just like extrude, scale, rotate.
Ferdi, are you listening to me?
Yeah, Antonio?
Okay. When I extrude, it shows another cube and not an elongated one. It just shows another one.
Can you maybe quickly share your screen?
Sorry, I can't. I can't because I am in another computer.
Ah, damn it. Okay, yeah. So just a sec. I'll go back and to share my screen.
I put it on the edit mode as you do, and then I click on the selected face, and then when I do it, it doesn't select the face. And then when I extrude it, it just pushes the cube, and that shows another one. It doesn't prolong it.
Okay. So you are up here. You have the face mode selected, no?
Yes, I have.
And if you click on one of the faces, it gets highlighted like this?
No, it doesn't get. It just get all the cube selected.
Okay. So maybe start again, go to File, New, General.
New, okay.
This is also like a good recommendation in general. Like if something doesn't work the way you want it to, start over. Start from the beginning. Like many times you're quicker in redoing the same steps than trying to fix something that is wrong. So I'm back to the beginning. Okay. Tollish. I tab into edit mode.
Yeah.
I select my face selection mode. I click on one face. Is this working?
It doesn't do that. So I will try it until I see what is happening. Sorry, no problem.
Okay.
Hi, maybe. I think you just selected all the faces, all possible faces, not just one face. You should see like all a little bit orange. So you need to select just only one face.
Yes, I just select one, but it doesn't allow me to select just one face. I don't know why.
So I will AA deselects everything.
Okay.
And then you can select only one face.
Okay.
Are you on edit mode or object mode?
Edit mode.
And AA deselects everything, and then
Yeah.
you can select just one.
No, it just doesn't allow me to select one face. But
Okay,
there's no problem. I will try it later on and try to see what.
Try file new again,
Yes, I did try it. File
and then
new
go
again.
and then go to the preferences,
Yeah.
and in the bottom left corner, tell it to load factory preferences.
Load. Okay.
And now try again.
Oh, okay. It's okay now. It's okay
Now
now.
it's okay? Okay.
Thank you, Ferdi.
Yeah, one thing is like whatever key you press, it will do something. Like if you hit your keyboard by accident, something changed.
Yeah. Okay.
And because like the amount of shortcuts that Blender uses is incredible. Like every key
Yeah.
is used for at least 3-4 different functions. Like it's either A or Shift A or Control A or Alt A or Control Shift A or Control Alt Shift A or Control
course,
Alt
of
A.
course.
So whatever you do, something changes. Yeah. So
Yeah, thank you.
Be careful. You're welcome. Be careful not to press any keys by accident.
It
Like-
works now. It works now. It works now.
Awesome.
Okay.
Okay, so let's go to edit mode and select a face and go crazy extruding again. You can also try if you hit extrude and then you right click, you basically cancel what you're doing, then you get a duplicate face, which right now you don't see it, but if you hit S for scaling, you can see that it just makes it smaller. And if I hit E now, I can extrude a hole into my thing.
Sorry, what was the letter before?
I select the face. I
Face.
hit E.
E.
Yeah, which would normally do my extrude.
Yeah.
Now I hit escape. I just cancel the command.
Yeah.
And it seems that nothing happened, but
Yep.
actually something happened. If I go to the vertex select mode, no, I can't really see it, but there's like a duplicate face now. And if I hit S for scaling, I can scale this face small. And now I can see it. And now I could extrude it in any direction.
Oh, nice, nice. This is crazy.
Yeah, so go wild, extrude something, and try the E right-click scale trick. So I could do this here.
Can we cut one of these cubes in half, one of the faces in half, and then extrude?
Yes, like the shortcut for cutting is Control R.
Control
Gives you,
R.
like,
Okay. Okay.
There's several ways of doing this. Right now, I would just cut it in half.
Okay.
And then I could again select it and extrude it.
Control R.
Control R. Control
Okay.
R is loop subdivide.
Okay.
But this we will discuss in more detail next Sunday.
Okay. Thank you, Ferdi.
Yeah. And so maybe just one more thing before I leave you experimenting a little bit. If we leave edit mode now and we go again to the key, to the wrench, and we apply a subdivision surface modifier, then you see what happens. Yeah.
Whoa.
So now it looks all smooth and nice.
Where did you go? To the tools?
I will undo. So I had my edgy thingy here. I have it selected. It says cube. It's still called cube. You could rename it if you want it. And
Yeah.
then I go to the wrench. I click on add modifier, and then subdivision surface. right? And then I increase the number for levels viewport a little bit, maybe to 3. And now it's already nice and smooth, but I still see all the facets. And for getting rid of the facets, I right click and say shade smooth.
Very nice.
But I can still go into edit mode by hitting tab, and it will show me like the coarse model that I had before, and I can still work in the same way as before. And now if I extrude, I get I can preview what is actually going to happen after the subdivision surfaces, and yeah, and I can still continue working. Let's say my model is a bit, I don't like it that it's so high, so I could just select, I go and I turn on the phantom mode, and I use the box select for selecting all of those. And I know I don't want those up here, so I hit AA and B again. And now I could move all of those a little bit up, and I get something that looks like this. So we have a little airplane now. Maybe I
think it doesn't fly.
Yeah. Maybe I don't like that it has this funny thing here, so I could select those 2 vertices and move them down a little bit. Like, and as always, there's like 10 ways of, like, I got used to G, Z, and now I only move them up or down. And we do the same with those here. G, Z. Yeah. It's an ugly airplane.
It's a chip. It's a ship.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, questions. Let me know if, like, I'm sure like one thing that happens very easily. I showed you the trick with where you select a face, you hit extrude, and then you cancel it. Which on the first look it seems that nothing happened, but if you go outside, you can see, oh, this is a lot. This corner is more pronounced than the others. And you might want this, but you might also hate it. But yeah, you have to know that here there's 2 faces on top of each other. And if you want to get rid of this, you either move one of the faces, or you collapse them so that they get joined again. But let's save this one for next time.
Okay.
Also, if you do the Control R for the loop cut, you can, if you move vertices very close to each other, then they make sharp corners. So now I would get like a almost round piece in front, and I could make another loop cut for moving this one a bit closer. So there's lots of tricks of like how to deal with vertices for making them do what you want in the subdivision surface. Okay, I hope this wasn't too much for today. But actually, I'm very happy that we got this far, because now you have something to do. We can spend the whole week now like extruding stuff and subdivision, surfacing it, and rotating and scaling and all the fun stuff. And I'm sure you're going to have a lot of questions next time, which is great. Next time we're going to model something that is a bit more in control than what we did today. We're going to learn about symmetry, and we're actually going to give a material to our object so that we can do our first render. And yeah, this is probably where we're going to finish the next time. Like, I can quickly show you, I think I have, oh, no. I quickly have to search where I left my example file. I will show you what I want to do next time. So I go to documents.
Whoa.
So there's an infamous Blender tutorial that is the Gingerbread Man. I think this was the first tutorial I ever did. Blender Gingerbread Man. So this is yeah, you can tell that this is like an older Blender version. I'm doing kind of like yeah, but it's a nice exercise because you learn how to position all the buttons, you learn how to define a material. This one has a sky with stars and stuff. I kind of modified it a little bit to like mine is like the modern version of the Gingerbread Man, and it looks like all shiny and nice. And we will also have a look at the real-time capabilities of Blender. So nowadays you can make it so that stuff looks like this. We'll just turn off this here. And now you get something that is like all nice and shiny, and people like nice shiny stuff. So this is where we're gonna end the next time. If everything goes well, we're gonna give him some buttons and maybe a nose or something. But this is basically the task for the next Sunday. And yeah, I bet you guessed it, like this works like just the same way than what we did today. Only that it looks a bit cooler because
Ferdi, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
When you choose, for instance, if you want to model it, put 3D modeling to print it in a printer, what do you choose? Blender or some CAD, some software CAD?
Depends a little bit on what I want to achieve. Like if I want to do something that is like very mechanical, very precise,
yeah,
I usually do it in a CAD program. But if I want to model something like a face or like a dog or a horse,
something more organic.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like you could model a car in Blender. It's completely possible. But actually, it's much easier in Blender than in most other softwares. But if you wanted to like, CNC mill this part, the polygonal format has some disadvantages.
Okay.
Since we're only dealing with triangles, a hole is actually not a round hole, but it's just like an accumulation of like triangles.
Yeah.
And so I can't just click on a hole and change its diameter. I could scale it and give it an exact diameter, but if you wanted to mill this hole, it would only be able to mill it by doing like a raster X and a raster Y, like going up and down.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if I modeled the same model with NURBS, I could select the circle or the hole and say mill only this hole, which is not possible in Blender.
Okay.
But yeah, they both have their advantages and disadvantages, which is quite visible in the industry. So like you build like mechanical stuff in NURBS, and you make movies with subdivisions
with Blender.
With Blender.
Okay.
Okay. I hope this was more or less successful. If you have any questions, advices, you can either write me an email, or I could also put my telephone number or whatever, or just like, I think we will find each other if you want to talk to me. I'm always happy to help with whatever I can help. Fab Academy is starting soon. Your second week is gonna be to model your final project. I modeled my final project in Blender the first time, of course, and I also made a simulation of like particles and stuff. Well, you saw what's possible in Blender. 3D is tough. It's not that you're gonna turn into like a Pixar killer in a week. Like even good artists take a while. Like modeling a head is something that even for an experienced artist takes a day. Making the whole body takes a week, and rigging and skinning and texturing it might take another week. So don't be patient. Like it's complicated stuff, and it takes some time. If you're stuck somewhere, just start from the beginning. Just redo it the way you did it the first time, and maybe the second time it's gonna go better. Links that I have on the website. There's tons of very good Blender tutorials out there, and the Blender wiki is usable now. There's like you can actually find what you're looking for, but most of the time it's sufficient to just type whatever you're missing and put Blender in front or in the end, and you will find some nice people that explain you what you want to know. This is the best part about Blender, that there's an awesome community. People are friendly and people help each other, and this is why you get a free workshop from me instead of paying like 1,000 euros per day for a Maya workshop. So that's the good part about Blender. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this a little bit. I will post the video of this whole thing on my website, and if you have any questions, feel free to send me a little email.
Thank you, Ferdi. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye. See you next week.
Thank you.